right, everybody, it's a Thursday here at Infobae, and you know what that means. We're going to be talking vulture funds today, and joining us here in the studio with us is, I want to introduce you one by one. It's Camila Russo. She's the Argentina correspondent for Bloomberg. Right next to her is Shane Romig. He's the Argentina correspondent for The Wall Street Journal. And via Skype from New York is joining us today Linette Lopez. She's a Wall Street editor for Business Insider. So, guys, have you been watching the news? Did you see the president's speech yesterday? She was very defiant. We're a few days away from default, and everything is up in the air right now. There's going to be a meeting today in New York between the Argentine delegation and the holdouts and the mediator appointed by Judge Grisey. So we're looking forward to see what happens today, because it could be a game changer. There are rumors of what some of the holdouts are planning in order to avoid default, but right now we don't really know.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because everybody's kind of betting on which way this is going to go, and in terms of the markets and bond prices, prices are reflecting the fact that people are expecting a deal. But we're getting close to the deadline here, and there doesn't seem to be any flexibility from the Argentine government. They're saying we've paid the money, even though the money has been frozen in an account here in the central bank, but an account to pay the bondholders on their performing bonds. And we keep hearing this rhetoric that means we're not in default, that we've paid. How can we be in default if we paid, even though if the money hasn't reached the bondholders?
Correct. Let me just read a segment of what the president said yesterday. She said they'll have to come up with a new term for when a debtor has paid. The payment is blocked and an external party prevents restructured bondholders from receiving the money. What do you think about this, Linette? Do you think we're going to go into default or not?
What I find really interesting, though, is that investors here in the United States are already positioning themselves to take advantage of low Argentine bond prices, regardless of whether or not there's default. If there's a default, they'll get those bonds even cheaper, betting that Argentina is a rich country and it will be able to get itself together at a certain point.
Now, let me read, because this is something for people who are watching from outside of Argentina. Let me read what Judge Grisey said on Tuesday during the meeting in which he refused to issue a stay for Argentina. He said, if we don't reach a settlement, there will be a default on July 30th. And that is the worst thing. That is about the worst thing that sitting here I can envision. I don't want that to happen. People will be hurt by that. Real hurt. Not vultures being hurt, but real people will be hurt. Now, I would like you guys to try to predict what do you think would happen to Argentina if we actually went into a default. This is a very serious situation.
I think that the most immediate consequence will be that Argentina, the sovereign provinces, companies will be locked out of international markets. I mean, they won't be able to get financing from international investors. This has been the case for the government since the default, basically, but companies and provinces had been able to issue bonds globally, and with this, I don't think they'll be able to for a while. So.
Shane?
Yeah, it's definitely. On the one hand, I mean, you have to distinguish that this is not a default like in 2001. This is not where there's not money to pay the policemen and the complete government collapse. This is different. This is salaries are still going to get paid. Government is still going to keep functioning. It is going to make a complicated situation even more complicated. The government is YPF, the state oil company, is seeking lots of money to develop the Vaca Muerta shale deposits. Yeah. That's going to make it even more difficult to get financing for that. And the provinces, like you say, companies, it's just going to add to a complicated situation.
And Vaca Muerta is an asset that, according to the government, the vulture funds are after.
Well, yeah, they want to prevent that moving forward. Their other vulture funds are trying to sue Chevron to prevent them from investing. People, the holdouts are coming at this in all directions. They've tried to seize the presidential plane, the naval training ship,
in Ghana, yeah.
Anything you can imagine. They're a lot of it is to make headlines and to keep the pressure up, but they also they have court orders for the, and they'll try and seize whatever assets they can to do that.
Linette, what's your perspective from there?
The weird thing is that a lot of Argentines that I talk to are almost preparing themselves for a lost year. They're writing it off already. You know, 2014 is gone. With that kind of attitude, with that kind of preparation, it's not inconceivable that the government would allow this to happen. If they can continue paying people, if the population has already kind of resigned itself to a lost year, regardless of whether, you know, it's just till if they can get a stay and it's till 2015 so they can avoid Rufo, or it's until the Kirchner administration is out of office. That kind of resignation is a horrible sign, I think, for negotiations, because it means that the government isn't that afraid to go into default. It isn't that afraid to say no.
Well, but here's the thing, and regarding what you just said. In Argentina, at least in Argentina, and in a large part of the world, the vulture funds have lost the moral battle. So if in this case the holdouts win and Argentina really goes into default, it's almost, in this case, it's going to strengthen the government here. Because the government can say, we try to pay, but they didn't let us. And this is exactly what Christina said yesterday.
And I think the backlash against the government from this depends on what the consequences will be for the economy, and I think there will be consequences. I mean, at least in the dollar. I mean, there will be no capital inflows, maybe even outflows. Reserves will probably start to fall again. That will affect the dollar blue rate, and that affects people directly. So, I mean, yeah, like maybe the week after people will say, yeah, we stood up to the holdouts, but then a month after, when the dollar's at whatever price, then people will start to think maybe it wasn't such a good idea.
Right. Well, it's still a national cause. I think it would be interesting. I mean, we're all praying for this not to happen, of course, but it's something that the entire Argentine population has rallied behind the president regarding this situation. So,
and it is interesting. It is becoming sort of a national issue in a way, almost like the Falkland Islands or the Malvinas. It's kind of one thing that's the vast majority of the people are falling behind. I mean, you have a lot of people saying, let's just be practical. You know, it's relatively speaking, it's not that much money. That's debatable how much money it actually will be because of the ROFU clause and these other kind of issues. But and it's also coming at a very difficult time. The economy is already in a recession. You know, you see the manufacturing numbers, the consumption numbers. The economy is really kind of tanking right now, and this is just going to kind of add to this whole drag on the economy. And you know, you talk to people, you take a taxi, everywhere people, the first thing they say is like, oh, things are bad, you know, I'm not making it to the end of the month. And
yeah, and this could certainly make it even worse.
Yeah.
Now, Linette, there's something that I wanted to ask you, because maybe you've heard about that. I hadn't heard about it until this morning, but according to a local newspaper, the holdouts are even willing to ask Judge Grisey to issue a stay until December 31st so that the Rufo clause is not triggered, and you know, in a way, everyone is happy. Have you heard about this? Is there any basis?
Heard this. You know, Elliot as in NML, they're very careful about the things that they say to reporters, and they haven't said anything like that to us. All of our statements have come carefully packaged, and they're a very tight-lipped hedge fund. But I wouldn't, it doesn't surprise me. They have said time and time again that they're willing to negotiate. They just want their money. That's the crazy, you know, there's a lot of ideology here on Argentina's part, but Paul Singer and his cohorts are very, very logical people. They just want their money.
Right. Well, and there's also even rumors that some so-called businessmen who are friends with Argentina would be willing to buy all these bonds, or sort of like buy this whole case, and that once we've gotten the vultures out of the way, they would be willing to ask Grisey to extend the stay in that situation. I mean, the thing is that there are so many rumors right now.
Yeah, I want to read the rumors you guys are reading. They sound fun.
Right. Well, this is why we have you, because and that's why I wanted to ask you this, because I hadn't heard of this before. You guys hadn't heard of this before, right?
No.
And I was wondering if you had heard of it in New York. Because this is actually, of course, it says, according to the article that says this, is that nothing comes free. I mean, it's not something that's free. Apparently, Paul Singer would, if this were true, he would be asking for Argentina to make a money deposit so that it would show that it's willing to pay after December 31st. But I thought it was interesting, and considering that there's a meeting that's taking place today in New York between the Argentine delegation and the negotiator appointed by Grisey and the vulture funds. Maybe it's something that we could see.
It's quite possible. It's quite possible. And here's the thing. I think that one thing that NML has constantly been trying to do is put Argentina in situations where the government is forced to make their desires or their motivations more clear. And I think that if you put Argentina in the position where you say, okay, we're willing to do a stay until December 2014 or to avoid Rufo. Rufo has been the main excuse for the government to say, this is why we're not going to pay you, at least at this point.
Right.
So if the government still insists on paying, despite the fact that Rufo is taken off the table, that shows you exactly what kind of game they've been playing from the start, which is we're not going to pay you, no, never, go away.
Right. All right. We need to go, but before we end this interview, I want your honest opinion. Are we going into default or not? We're 6 days away from the deadline.
I mean, it's complete speculation, of course. I don't think anybody except the people that are directly involved in this really know. If I had to wager based on what I'm seeing, from the signs from the government seem to be, we have paid by depositing the money, and so we're not in default, and they'll go forward in that same manner, which will mean a default technically. How long that will go on, if that's a long strategy, or if that is just to get to the end of the year.
There's
so
not much more to go on. I mean, we're just 6 days away.
Yeah. So, it's purely speculation, but that seems to be where the things are headed. Unless there's a last-minute deal.
I mean, just looking at what people have said, I mean, not listening to any rumors, just looking at the facts, it looks like both sides are pretty well set in their position. They're not. Argentina doesn't want to negotiate without a stay. The holdouts don't want to give a stay unless they see concrete steps from Argentina. So it's basically a game of chicken, and we have only, I think, 6 days left.
6 days.
And nobody's moving. So sitting right here looking at the facts, it does look like they'll default, but it doesn't mean that at the last minute one will budge and concede to the other one. So it might be like until the very last minute that we see a resolution.
Linette?
It's hard to say. This has gone beyond logic, I think. So I can't logic this one out. There's no if, when, and if then. Right. What we have to know at this point, or what we will find out, is whether ideologically not paying is more important to the government than saving a few months of complete and utter disaster. I mean, a lot of Argentines believe that once the Kirchner government is out, everything will be okay again. I don't necessarily buy that. I think that this could do more damage than people think, because the country isn't completely recovered from the last default. So right. Is ideology going to trump pure necessity? I don't know. I don't go shoe shopping with Christina. I wish I did.
Right. Well, like we said at the beginning, everything is still up in the air. We'll see what happens after today's meeting. Maybe it could be a game changer, maybe not. What we do know is that we are 6 days away from a potential default, and we're all praying and hoping that it doesn't get to that. So when we meet next Thursday, to continue this debate, I am really hoping that it's all going to be over, and we're going to be... What's next Thursday, by the way? It's
the last day of the month.
31st.
It's 31st.
It's going to be a day after the deadline.
It's a day after the deadline. So by next Thursday, we should know in what situation Argentina is. Fingers crossed. Thanks for watching, guys, and thank you for joining us today. We'll see each other next week. Bye.